All right.
Hey, how are you, folks?
Good.
Welcome to Trek Tonight.
There it is.
Yep. There it is.
I'm glad I went through this version because I kind of
Oh,
strapped
there
my
you
hands
go.
up last time.
There you go. Yeah. Still working on that a little bit. That's not bad. All right, welcome to Trek Tonight. We are here tonight once again to talk about Star Trek Prodigy, episode 14, I believe.
Yes, sir.
There is Camera Geek, aka Keith, aka not Joe Townsend. How are you, Keith? Good to see you. So how you guys been?
Okay, it's all systems nominal. Let's put it that way.
There you go.
I like that.
Yep.
Better answer than I have. I'm again just doing well and trying to stay warm.
Craig Lubin says hello, everyone. How are you, Craig?
Right?
Hello,
Our
Craig.
old good buddy Craig Lubin is here. Yeah, well, it feels like we were just here because we did that Artemis launch
Yes.
screening, which was kind of fun. Although I did end up, we signed off around 2, and I just couldn't help myself because I wanted to see them do the burn to shoot towards the moon. So I ended up till 3 a.m. watching them do the burn to go to the moon. So,
Who can blame you?
Hey, not that I really saw anything. It's just them saying, "Well, now we're burning." Okay.
And great job on the impromptu shows this week. I mentioned that in the green room, and
Thank you.
just want to put it out there live for others to hear. But yeah, that's what's great about being a little bit experimental. Pays off.
Well, we're trying to have some new things. Create some new content as well that fills in the middle a little bit. And every now and then I get a wild hair about something and decide I'm going to hop on and talk about it. So, but yeah, good reason to check us out on Twitch and follow us there because
and sometimes you get the attention of an executive producer.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Aaron Wolke did drop into the chat one late night when I was on. I really didn't expect to talk to anybody. I just got on to talk. But at any rate, we are.
I don't know if I mentioned on the show. He's now following my Trek Haiku feed.
That's right. That's right. Which is very cool.
Absolutely.
Is very cool. Now I have the title right for today, right? Crossroads.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I put it up there and I didn't double check it, but I had seen it, about an hour before, and I thought, gee, I hope I got that right. But Crossroads is the episode, again, episode 14 of Star Trek Prodigy. And who wants to go first on just, we've got an episode here where, let me do this. You've got, they make an executive decision, the crew of the Protostar, to stash the ship because they do want to connect with Starfleet. But the ship is like a weapon and will wreak havoc on anything that is Starfleet. So they stash the ship under a bunch of snow and on a planet where they figure they can get a lift to someplace, a star base somewhere that is Starfleet. And then, of course, while being there, they fumble across Admiral Janeway, who is searching for the people that stole the Protostar, and then of course sort of mayhem ensues. So what did you guys think?
Well, if maybe I can go first because I have a couple of, they seem to be misgivings, although I'm wondering if Leo might set me straight on a couple of things because again I'm filling in blanks as I go on this show.
Right.
But couple of nits here if they are indeed nits. It seems these kids are very anxious to find Starfleet and to seek their assistance. I understand that the Protostar itself is sabotaged, or as William Shatner put it, sabotaged.
Right.
Yeah.
But when they actually encounter Starfleet, they run. I mean, would not it have been possible for them to say, hey, we got this ship? I mean, I guess being kids, they don't maybe not thinking in those terms, but
yeah, I briefly, it's funny because Chris and I sort of briefly discussed that point
Mhm.
for the show, but my feeling is they are kids, and when you're a kid, you're afraid of being caught doing something wrong.
Right.
That's most kids know that they'll get in trouble if they do something wrong, and because it is a bunch of grown-ups with as it turns out, a much bigger starship than they have.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of freaking out because they don't want the protostar to link up with any Starfleet ship because it will destroy it.
Right.
And there was an implication that it might broadcast it to other Starfleet ships, set up like a cascade of destruction. But we'll see it. But I think it's just that they're my feeling is they're kids and they're freaking out because while they are more mature than most people of that age, they are at heart still kids and react like kids.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I kind of like about the show is that I feel like the writing is being true to that in the sense because a lot of times you see a show and it's the main characters are all kids and all of a sudden they're doing extraordinary things and they become great heroes and they become this and they become that. These characters I think still do behave like kids, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, Leo and I talked a little bit about it before the show. And yeah, it would go a lot easier for them if they had just stayed put and said, hi, we know you're looking or if you're looking for us, yes, and here's what's wrong with the protostar. And we escaped on board the ship from a prison camp, basically, because we found it because someone else stole it.
Yeah.
I mean, they could say that and explain it. And I would think that Admiral Janeway would listen to them. But they're kids, and they're assuming they're going to get in trouble. And
how do they know that for sure?
Yeah.
Right.
It seemed like Dahl was maybe possibly on just getting ready to tell her a little bit about that. Then of course,
right.
up runs somebody to say, "Oh, got to get out of here, got to hightail it." But to me, there were a lot of positives. I mean, I enjoyed the episode a lot. I think I might have even liked it better than last week's, as good as that was. I liked the fact that we saw a lot of familiar alien races. We got further evidence that this is what the Klingons are. This is what I was very surprised to see Xindi there.
Yes.
Wow.
A little love for the Xindi, who it's funny because a lot of here's the thing I find sometimes in fandom, and I'm not saying this is across the board, but when you bring back something that people have seen, people are like, oh, there's a problem with that because this interferes with the continuity, blah, blah, blah. And can't they give us something new? And when they give you something new, people are like, well, I don't really like the Xindi, So the Xindi, and people will go, how come we never saw the original show? Because this was written in the 2000s, in the 21st century, and the other one was written in the 1960s. So, I mean, you know why they did do it. And I think the Xindi are an interesting idea for a species, that they're all Xindi, but they all, they have different sort of genetic backgrounds, whether they were reptilian or arboreal. I can't remember there were like 6 different.
Yeah.
There were the primates and the fish, what have you.
Fish people, I don't really think. But I thought that was kind of an interesting idea that they could, even though they argued, they still all consider themselves Xindi versus, we're the real Xindi, and like, no, these guys. So I love seeing them come back in, if only in a sort of, goon, background role.
Now, Keith says what I was saying to you in the green room, Leo. Keith says your explanation makes sense. I just find that particular trope of miscommunication tedious. And that's what I said to Leo before Joe hopped in. I said, I just hope that it's not going to become one of those things where this miscommunication just keeps rolling along and doesn't, because you see that very often. Somebody should have said something and they didn't because of one reason or another, and then it creates all kinds of mayhem that it could easily have been solved. So yeah, Keith, I thought the same thing, and that was something that I had mentioned to Leo before.
It is because a lot of times it's used in a lot of call that CW shows, many of which I watch, so I'm not
right.
But it is like if you're a kid, if like maybe 14 or 16 is the oldest you are,
right.
You're still a kid, and you still like you again, you hide when you've done something bad. Most kids try to cover it up, or pretend it didn't happen, or whatever. Right. So for characters that age acting that way, it makes sense. I don't think it's. I'm hoping by the end of this season, they've found a way to communicate with Janeway and let them know what's going on.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah, it's funny when you say that, because I remember an evening sitting around with family, and all of the people that were the kids of the grandparents decided to admit all of the things that they did when they were teenagers. And it was really funny, because we all sat around and talked about things we had done. It was like, we did this, and it was very funny. But yeah, as teenagers, everybody had everything they did.
Yeah.
Hey, while we're on the topic of the Xindi, let me put forth yet another one of my probably fruitless theories, but what the heck? But as Leo pointed out so well just now, the Xindi, of course, is made up of actually a number of separate, species.
Right.
And we did have a convention, what I consider to be a conventional Klingon in this episode, which we know we're getting, with Worf coming up in Picard.
Right.
But I wonder if there's a basis of a comparison being established here, that maybe we'll use the Xindi approach to kind of explain why we have different Discovery Klingons. Something to think about looking forward, I think.
Possibly. It's because we haven't seen the Discovery Klingons since it was it was in the second season. It wasn't
right
as prominently because the war was over. They
had hair.
Yeah. So I think the Discovery era, they've sort of, because we've not seen any Klingons on Discovery since they went to the far future. So that's something I don't know if they'll address it eventually.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Well, I think they're going to have to address it. Well, they don't have to, I guess, but I have a feeling they're going to address it on Strange New Worlds, because they're kind of at that cusp between the two.
Yeah, I don't know whether, if we see Klingons, whether they will be, old school Klingons, or, the new and improved Klingons.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of fans that are going to want to see swarthy makeup Klingons just out of nostalgia. But sure. I would think that, I don't know, it's a toss of the dice. I don't know which way would be the better way to go.
Well, personally, I never needed an explanation. I just figured, well, better makeup.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But
me too.
Now that they've done it, I think they have to follow through. So it'll be interesting to see if Xindi kind of,
Yeah, I don't remember. It's funny, actually, because I did not like the Discovery Klingons. And I had a reaction to that, but I don't remember. I just thought that opening sequence in Star Trek the Motion Picture, where you were tracking the Klingon ship and they have that great shot of it and it rotates around.
Yeah.
It was just so cool. I don't ever remember being disturbed by the change of the Klingons.
I'm
just not remembering it because it was so long ago. But
I mean, it was sort of like, okay, now they have money. You can actually make them look like aliens versus guys in
right.
Yeah. So
what were some of the highlights of the show for you guys? You want to go first, Leo, this time?
Yeah, I'm delighted they brought back the outrageous Okana, who appeared in one episode of TNG.
Right.
It was sort of this Romeo and Juliet sort of deal between these two planets, and he was sort of this lovable rogue, and apparently did very well for himself amongst the female crew members of the Enterprise.
Including Terry Hatcher.
Including Terry Hatcher,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Before she really blew up when she had a little under 5 walk on in Star Trek. But I like the fact that we saw him previously DJing on Lower Decks for that big captain's party. The crew of the Cerritos were denied entrance to. He was the DJ. He had the iPad. They gave him the eye patch there, so now we see him. He's a little bit older than that. His hair's gone gray, as is Billy Campbell, who played him in the original show. I think it's interesting because they've had Janeway as this sort of very upstanding, moral, sort of parent figure, and he's kind of like the sort of. Is that the deadbeat dad? It's not like he owes them. That's not an exact, but he's sort of like the sort of the uncle nobody likes to talk about. Where he'll be like, "Well, I'll show you how to hotwire a spaceship, kid."
Right.
So, and I think that the show having a bit of that sort of that, going back to the Scoundrel with a Heart of Gold. I think that is a new aspect of the show, which I think will add to it and give some layers.
Yeah, that's cool. Just to jump in here, Craig says the Xindi had an avian species that had gone extinct by the time they were introduced in Enterprise. Continuing with Joe's theory, perhaps this is what happened to the disco era Klingons. Interesting.
It would seem to fit, and it seems more than a bit coincidental that they were brought in the same episode.
Right. Once again, I want to give a shout out to John Van Gostein for giving us a thumbs up. John, hopefully you're still tuned in, and we'd love to have you here. So thank you very much. All right, Joe, what about you? Highlights for the...
You bet. Expanding on what Leo just mentioned about Okana, I mean, here's our Han Solo in this version of Mos Eisley, I think.
Right.
I think it paid some good. I mean, all you needed was a bar and a alien band, but absent that, we got some good homage, which kind of flipped it on its ear. I mean, instead of the desert, we had a snow planet, where they're racing a land speeder across the terrain.
Right.
I have to wonder, and I guess anything's possible, but I guess beyond window dressing, I have to wonder how a Kazon got there. Personally,
well, if you remember, there was a Kazon in the very first episode of Discovery. He sold the little, child Cation to the diviner. There was sort of this little cat person who Gwen sort of like took under her wing, although she did leave her on the planet. So draw your own conclusions. But that Kazon I believe is the same one who's the slave trader that are.
I had forgotten that. Thank you, Leo. Yeah.
Lieutenant JG was spinning, holding court amongst the riffraff in this sort of outpost bar. And I love when Janeway realizes like they're the kids, and she says, well, you forgot to mention that they're kids, and he's kind of like,
right.
Because he's like, well, I didn't think you'd find out, because it looks much worse for him that his outpost was destroyed by children,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
How about you, Chris? What are your highlights?
Let's see. You touched on Okana, which is great. I liked seeing the difference between Admiral Janeway and Hollow Janeway.
Yes.
And Admiral Janeway is a lot more of a hard ass which is great, which is fine because she's been through a lot. And she's also worried about Chakotay, and she wants to understand what happened to him. But Hollow Janeway is specifically designed to be helpful. So you've kind of got a kinder, gentler Janeway as the Hollow version. But I liked the moment where Dal recognizes that the woman he meets is the same. And I've forgotten exactly what the line of dialogue is, but Janeway says something, and Dal says, "Yeah, I should have expected you to say that," or "I should," whatever it was. He recognizes that they are in some way one and the same.
Was it the "make it so" line, possibly? There's part of that conversation anyway.
Yeah, in that conversation, I just forget exactly what it was because I only got to watch the episode once today, unfortunately. But yeah, I liked that. I like that they're advancing the plot now into something, that's going to be kind of exciting. And we sort of had our standalone episode last week, but now we're back to the plot. That was yeah.
And it's now that of course it's it's not really more of a tragedy of errors than a comedy, but the fact is they're trying to get away, and they almost get away, but then Janeway is a seasoned ship's commander, so she's not faffing about.
Right.
He orders them to fire a torpedo. This is more of a nitpick, but it sort of bothers me when they're going to whatever this slips issue.
You jumped ahead to my next segment.
Great timing.
I mean, it's a minor thing, and it doesn't. But the fact is, when they're like in hyper warp or whatever it is that the protostar can do,
right?
They're in this weird sort of tube. I guess when it's supposed to be stars streaking by,
right?
And it feels like it doesn't. It feels more like a Star Wars effect, a little bit like when they make a jump into hyperspace, than it does.
Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah. I mean,
little Doctor Who there too, maybe.
A little Doctor Who. I'm not. I mean, again, it's not enough to make me stop watching the show or liking the characters.
No, God, no.
But it's just I kind of feel like why it feels like a little. It's like well, we have fondant, then we have frosting, and you're like, do we really need both on top?
Well, let's go back to my age-old theory, which is that we are trying to draw a youth audience.
Agreed.
And we're trying to draw a youth audience that comes from a background in Star Wars. So a little effect here, a little graphic there, a little something here and there that is familiar might help aid that.
It's stuck out of me too, and I had the same initial thoughts as Leo, but it occurs to me now that it was probably just an intentional, another homage. This is what the warp effect looked like in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Justifiably explained by the fact that it's slightly different warp speed in Star Trek.
But here's a question that I have. Mm-hmm. So if the protostar is an experimental prototype, and it can make this particular kind of a jump that's different, how can the Dauntless follow them?
Well, they remember Hollow Janeway.
Does the Dauntless also have that technology in it?
I don't know if it has the same. It doesn't have a protostar. It doesn't have a star, I don't think, on board as an engine. But Hollow Janeway, she's like, we're being chased by the Dauntless, like something like a slipstream warp drive. And I know I'm getting that terminology wrong, but it does have like a more advanced warp drive than presumably the rest of the fleet, or the majority of the fleet, unless everything's
well. If anybody has an understanding of that beyond me, make sure you throw it in the comments.
Well, I don't know if this is an understanding, or in my case, probably just a guess, but I think we've seen other examples throughout Trek lore that if one ship generates that type of warp field, the other one can kind of piggyback on it. Maybe they were able to get sucked right in there, and
well, we did it with the Borg.
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah, the Enterprise did it with the Borg. They would jump into they'd get in there fast enough, and they get sucked into the time vortex. So, yeah. I guess.
Now, I do have one issue, which is pretty comical, and maybe this was an intentional issue. That I'm giving the writers a lot of credit here, which is probably deserved. How many times do we see Riker plant his butt on a console in Next Generation? Nothing happens. And this little guy, little Murph, just pops on there and sets off torpedoes.
Let's talk a little bit about the new version of Murph, who looks like, for our video game players in the audience, he looks like a Pilkin, Pikmin, which was a Nintendo game about like these little guys with leaves on their heads. It's not exactly, he's still made of jelly,
right?
But he has a kind of like little, candle flame on top of his head. Oh, yeah. And it's true, because I would think, I mean, I understand why, because it's a kid show and it's and you have to heighten the the stakes. But you would think if you're arming torpedoes, first of all, you have to arm them. There's a whole process. It's not just it's not just a video game button. Do that on, because you don't want a torpedo to be fired at the wrong time, as it did this time.
Right.
So I think it was very much because it is a kid's show. That's the sort of thing that happens.
I think it was meant to be a tiny bit of humor.
Yeah.
And also to accelerate the like, gosh darn it, we just keep making them think we're worse than we are kind of thing. Yeah. Which I just think is part of the plot development. But Murph shouldn't have been able to launch a torpedo that easily. But, I think it was, again, part of the humor, on a certain level.
Well, maybe his little butt has the feeling of like body heat in a human's fingers or something like that.
Maybe. So little we know about his species. I would say I did, this felt very Star Wars, and there was there were chases, there was a lot of like forward momentum, which Star Trek, not that Star Trek lacks forward momentum, but Star Trek is a little more talky, generally speaking,
right,
than Star Wars. And I think that because this is a kid show, they can't indulge too much, philosophizing, for a show for kids.
Well, again, let's look at Star Trek the Animated Series, which I think went over the heads of a lot of kids.
Yeah.
On a certain level, it didn't have enough whiz bang to it. But
in terms of departure, this one reminded me quite a bit of Next Generation's Gambit, because Roddenberry was quoted once as saying, "I don't want to do pirate shows and things of that nature," and that's exactly what Gambit was. And I think this was kind of similar in the terms of a departure, in the storytelling aspects of particularly the Star Wars homages.
Yeah. Now, to jump back to all these comments we've been making, Keith says there's going to come a point that it's a kid show excuse is going to wear thin. Surprisingly,
perhaps depends on what the target audience feels.
That's a tough remark coming from Keith.
That is. That's practically a profanity. But I would say, I don't think there's going to be. Here's the thing: is like it is a kid show, but it is a show, not just a kid show, but it's a show about kids.
Right,
kids are the protagonists of it, and I think they're doing a good job characterizing, like the mistakes they make. It's like if only we'd just calmed down and talked, we would have been able to straighten out. Yeah, but there's also.
Read that one, Chris.
Thank you,
Well,
Keith, for giving
thank
us
you.
thank you for giving us the comic book cursing.
Yes.
Because this is about a kid show. I appreciate
Yes.
that.
It's I'm enjoying this. I think that it's I think forward momentum is a good thing. I think I don't know how long that, because at the end they changed the shield modulation of the protostar and slip across the neutral zone. So we know they're much closer to heart of Federation space now. Not
yeah.
you know.
Right. Go ahead, Leo.
So
Finish up the point because I want to bring up something about the neutral zone.
So they're now there, and of course three Romulan warbirds decloak in front of the Dauntless, and there's a commander. It's like, if you cross the neutral zone, that is an act of war. As they are fond of saying, to the people with the invisible ships.
But this is an issue that I have, and it's not by any means a Prodigy issue. It is a Trek issue.
Okay.
And that is, you've got this neutral zone, which I'm assuming is a fair chunk of space. I mean, it's not just like 300 feet. It's a distance between the two areas.
Yes.
The Federation will show up and just cross the neutral zone, and all of a sudden there's the Romulans, which means they're hanging out in the neutral zone.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about this. They should be on their side of the neutral zone. It should take a Federation starship a while at impulse to cross that neutral zone and get the attention of the Romulans. I never understand that, because they'll just wander in, maybe, I don't know what, a little bit, few miles they're into it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's the Romulans, and nobody sits there and says, well, what are you doing there?
I think in the older uses of the neutral zone, way back when, like in the Enterprise incident, I think you saw a little bit more of that type of reality in terms of the distances involved. They weren't just right there waiting for them. Plus, Pog brings up an excellent point, which I've always wondered myself. He just said it so succinctly. Engineer Pog, it is the neutral zone, isn't it? Can't they go in and be okay?
Right.
Without crossing to the other side?
Yeah.
Well, that's my point. My point is, and maybe it's just supposed to be, the Romulans are bad guys. So therefore they're going to sit there and try to spark it up with the Federation no matter what they do. But they're doing exactly what they're accusing the Federation of doing.
That's true. They did decloak. It wasn't like they decloaked, 300 clicks ahead, Captain, something like that. It is very much like they are like uncomfortably close to the Dauntless.
Right. Yeah.
Ships that's another weird Star Trek issue, is the ships are all super close to each other in a way that seems super dangerous, because all it takes is like one miscalculation, and you're knocking into each other. A lot of room in space. Just scatter out a little bit, lads. We don't need to be smelling each other's tailpipes.
Keith says he's enjoying the show too. So not to say he's not enjoying it, but I'm tired of drama through misunderstanding, and I hope they resolve the misunderstanding soon. And I agree with you, Keith, on the sense that I've seen it done a lot of times in other shows.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it doesn't drag on way too long.
May I address something that, Keith's point, which is absolutely correct. But you know what? Let's think about it this way. Again, going to Leo's point about the show is about kids, and that will get old. However, what type of character is more susceptible to evolution than children?
Yeah.
I mean, we have to assume that this is going to be a 3, 4, 5 season series.
Right.
And when you do a lot of your growing is when you're from preteen to teen and young adulthood. I'm going to have faith that we're not going to see the laziness of writing where they just stay the same.
I agree. And let's look at it already. We're in the second half of the first season, and we've already seen significant character development in these characters.
Yeah.
Which is nice to see, once again, in a show created for kids, because you don't usually see that level of sophistication in a kid show. So that's kind of neat.
I think that they will, because, I mean, much like in the first episode of our last season of Lower Decks, Captain is exonerated sort of off screen,
Right.
you know, because they only have 10 episodes and they're not going to waste 3 episodes, you know, bring you to where they knew they were going anyway. I think, especially Dal, I hated him first. Yeah, I think he's become a much more centered character.
Dal is a really cool character, and yeah, I wouldn't say I hated him, but he wasn't my favorite. And I also felt like, why is he the captain? But he's starting to step into that role, which is kind of cool.
He certainly wasn't the leader type at the beginning. I remember that much. And
I agree.
Look where we are now and where we're going. So, but it doesn't feel rushed, which is also a plus in my view. It's not like, despite the limited episodes and so forth, I feel the evolution so far has been pretty much on point.
Right.
Again, given their circumstances, they are going to grow and change more quickly, possibly, than if they were just kids at home watching TV or something.
I believe we're going to see a shift or something big happen at the end of the season, whether they finally find a way to communicate with Janeway without, infecting the Dauntless, and perhaps a whole bunch of other Starfleet ships.
Right.
Or maybe they will find Chakotay at the end of the season, because I feel like you can't keep teasing Chakotay, in flashbacks and so on, and not pay it off.
My guess and my theory is that the discovery of Chakotay is going to be our big season end reveal. That's my prediction.
That makes total sense, but at the same time, I was expecting the inevitable meeting of the two crews a little bit later in this season too. So maybe he'll come sooner.
Well, maybe. I mean, they sort of run it, because they have their little weird interactions while they're at the sort of the space bazaar.
Right.
I did love the one where Jacob Pog runs into Dr. Noom, and it's the first other Tellarite he's ever seen.
Right.
And then Dr. Noom, in his typical sort of, jerk store fashion, says, "Pog is a name we give to the runts."
That was
I mean, like, at first I thought he was like, well, it's the typical Starfleet sort of cantankerous, curmudgeonly doctor, but he's just being a real dick to Jenkum Pog, who is, understandably, he's like, I like him because I like Jason Mantzoukas, but Jacob Pog is kind of a pain in the ass. He talks about himself in the third person. He his dedication seems to waver moment to moment, and he's just sort of this. Tellarites are known to be very argumentative,
right?
So but come on, Doctor. Just say he's like. You can see it's a kid. What are you like? Why are you being such a dick to Paul?
Yeah.
So, but it was nice for him to have that moment.
Yes.
So,
how do you like that?
I do have an accidental Townsville tidbit, if I can coin that.
Sure.
Accidental only in the sense that Facebook alerted to me this quite separately from our efforts here. But some 56 years ago today was the first NBC broadcast of Journey to Babel, which of course was the first.
Oh, interesting.
How about that? Just how it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I do have one remaining issue
yes.
with the episode this week. Somehow they should have shoehorned in some dialogue with Okana and one of the other characters, doesn't really matter which, where they asked about his date with the ensign played by the lovely Terry Hatcher way back when.
Yeah.
And his response would have been, "They're real and they're spectacular."
Yeah. Would have been. That's
a little sign bill already, folks.
A little sign bill, a little something for the folks.
Right. Yeah. Well,
what
do you guys think of the I'm going to take those issues off now. What do you guys think of the ensign character who was able to spot Gwen? So I think she's kind of cool.
She's an interesting character. She's voiced by Jamil of the Good Place fame. She is Ensign Ascendia, and although I read a couple of reviews and a couple of comments. Somebody was like, "Why is the navigator, helping rehabilitate this patient, and not like they couldn't design up like another like a generic like medical tech to be walking with him?" When I guess in her off time, when she, in between, piloting this advanced spaceship, she gets to play nursemaid to this weird alien,
right?
Whose story Janeway seems to believe without question. That is something I kind of feel like I'm imagining we saw a little bit of it when her XO was like, "You told us, to listen to our emotions but not be ruled by them." And I think because of your friendship with Chakotay, I think that you're losing perspective.
Right.
Because it's sort of a no-win scenario. I mean, do you cross the neutral zone, or do you, and maybe have that technology stolen by the Romulans, or do you risk a war? It's a hard choice.
Yeah.
But she is a little Ahabbing it there.
Yes.
With the protostar. So
I do have a thought too on the Ascendia character. If I'm not getting that quite right, but in past episodes of Star Trek, unjoined trills seem to be a little bit lacking or a little bit incomplete without their symbiote. And our producer friend Aaron confirmed on Twitter that this character is an unjoined trill. So I thought it was kind of cool to see that there isn't necessarily just this. They're kind of wimpy without their slug inside.
Well, I mean, I would say the joint trolls definitely have like a lot of they have a lot of high cards in their deck because they can call on the experiences of previous hosts.
Right.
But it's also revealed that there are only so many symbionts, and they said, well, you had to be, you have to go through all these rigorous tests to see if you're compatible. The idea is that they're all compatible. Anybody could theoretically have a symbiont, but it's just that there are only so many. So they had to sort of put out that
exactly.
Bit of and, but it was interesting because she's like, your father, and you see like the terror in Gwen's eyes when she realized like, we thought we left him someplace where he would he'd be safe, but not and he's with them, and she's like, "Oh, I'm working with your father," which is like it's like Hitler, you tell that to like Mussolini's daughter, and you're like, shit, I better get out. So it was interesting. Again, it's like it's missing communications, but you understand, like for these kids who've gone through so much, and was pinning all their hopes on Starfleet, and now it feels like they can't rely on that.
Right.
So
well, and we do have to bear in mind that they were held in a prison camp as work labor before this whole show started. Mm-hmm. So to be honest with you, they're pretty
well adjusted.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I have to say that so far, I think Ensign Ascensia, for those reasons, is my favorite of the Dauntless characters. My least favorite still got to be the Doctor. He just
well, I like I said, I was willing to give him a pass until he really started kicking Jankum Pog while he was down. So I'm kind of digging the Andorian XO.
Yes.
Yeah.
Down. Commander
Tysis.
It's
Looking
TY.
at your notes.
Yeah,
Tysus. Yeah, I have it as Tysus.
he's I think kind of a cool character, and he's like he's not a Vulcan, but he was sort of like trying to be. He was the cooler head to Janeway's
Right.
passion.
Right.
So I like seeing that dynamic between the two of them.
And again, kind of a sophisticated concept to throw into a kid's show.
Yeah,
The idea of are you doing this for revenge, or are you doing it because it's the smart thing to do?
yeah.
Maybe your head's not in the game right. I don't know. Kind of cool. I like that. I like kids shows, number one, because I'm a parent.
Yeah.
So I like when a kid's show has stuff in it to keep adults involved and engaged. But I also like when they offer something that makes kids stretch their mind a little bit. And I think one great thing about this show is that it does create entertainment for kids, but it also has some themes to it that are a little older and are very, very much Trek. So I think that's cool. Do we want to rate this episode, guys?
Sure.
Because we are getting to the end of our 5 stars. Yeah, no,
that's the total possible.
Yeah, I put that in there, so it. There we go. At any rate, do we want to rate the episode?
Sure.
Why not? Make it a trend.
I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Who?
Joe. Or
Joe. Yeah, go ahead. Joe.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just kind of piggybacked on Leo's last week, so that's very fair. Last week, and again, not to draw comparisons, I gave it a 4.5 because of its nature. I really enjoyed this one. I'm going to give it a solid 4. I think there was a few things in it that kind of took me out of it a little bit in terms of some inconsistencies, which, let's put it this way, if those turn out to be intentional, as I've used that word many times, I'll take it back. But let's give it a solid 4. I give it a solid B this week.
How about you, Leo?
I'm also going to give it a solid 4. I enjoyed it. I felt like it had a lot of forward momentum. Both the plot and the story is moving along, and we're getting to see, there's a bit of a cliffhanger. Janeway, is at the edge of the neutral zone, staring down the barrel of 3 Romulan warbirds.
Right.
So she's definitely not going to be able to take off after our heroes, but our heroes are basically shark-infested waters. So
right,
I'm curious to see what whether we get to see like this is something that always is, and I think we've discussed this. It's like both the Romulans and Klingons have empires, and empires imply conquest. Now, the majority of planets in the universe, in the galaxy or the universe, I'm just going to say, are uninhabited. It's only a small amount that have like intelligent inhabitants or have biological. A lot of them are dead rocks, which is great if you want iron or copper or deuteronium or what have you. You don't have to fight anybody. It's just there.
Right.
But the question is, will we see people that have been conquered by the Romulans, and what are they like? That's something I'd be curious to see. I'm not sure we will get to see it, although it's always more interesting when our characters interact with new, let's call them NPCs in the RPG sense of the word.
Right.
So I don't know. It's I enjoyed it. It had a lot of forward momentum. It's not that it wasn't Star Trek, but it didn't feel like it was really wrestling with an issue, a larger issue, the way, let's say, last week's did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm going to join you guys on the 4. And I will say this episode, when you say that, Leo, it leans into my feeling that this episode was really about advancing the overall plot arc.
Yes.
So, yeah, there wasn't room for some sort of Star Trek philosophical, thing to grapple with, because most of the episode was devoted to that, and it is a half hour.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would give it a 4, which means, ta-da! Well, hang on. We
There
get
it is.
Yeah.
episode rating is 4 Vulcan salutes. So that's great.
But again, in terms of having faith in the writing that I've seen so far, this could be considered, like you say, in many ways a setup, or again a progressive episode, progressing the scenario along. But I don't think we're going to get 3 or 4 of those in a row like we did with Picard season 2.
No, I don't either.
I like the fact that they have, that they finally met up with Janeway and company,
Right.
Because there's nothing more frustrating. This is more of an older TV sort of trope where like somebody's being chased by somebody, and they'll never catch them.
Right.
They'll get real close. That tabloid journalist is going to catch up with Dr. David Banner one of these days. Except he never does. It's not. I'm always frustrated with when a premise of a show means that once that that's been resolved, it means the show is over.
Right.
You have to find a way, and then you see the opposite of that in a show like the Good Place, which kept pivoting and changing in such a way that you never got bored. It never felt like they were like, ugh, they're still there.
Right. Exactly.
Now, am I correct in my understanding this takes place a few years prior to the destruction of Romulus, give or take?
Sometime before the destruction of Romulus, because Janeway, has a bit of gray in her hair, unlike her hollow counterpart.
Right.
So
it just seems like it might be interesting if this somehow, if it stayed on the air long enough, which we hope it does, might lead up to those events, have something to do with that.
Yeah, curious. By the way, I do want to say I love those Federation sort of long parkas that the Dauntless crew had.
Yeah.
These were very cool. They had a hood built into it.
Right.
I mean, the kids one were very sort of like Ice Station Zebra kind of.
Yeah.
Which were cool. But I do love those clean lines of those very nice Starfleet, cold weather gear.
Yeah, neat things they're doing with the costuming and the character design in this show.
Yeah,
we're going to see a live action version of the Lower Decks episode.
Lower Decks,
Strange New World. So maybe we'll see a live action version of these.
Now, that would be interesting.
I think it is later because if you remember the costume, the uniform that Picard wore was slightly different than this. This is slightly different from the. Here's the thing. It seems that the Department of Uniform Design at Starfleet Command is way overfunded because they're always looking at new uniforms, and it sort of defies the idea of a uniform being the word uniform being the same,
right?
Because California class crew wear different uniforms than the rest of the fleet, unless they're just waiting to roll it out with the California class. I don't know why. I don't know why, because more bright colors are better for animation than black, gray.
Oh, sure.
Flash of color,
Right.
So, although we have seen those uniforms as well.
The one time the first time they showed different uniforms on a different series was Deep Space Nine, of course. I thought, well, that made sense. It's more of a kind of a I can't find the word, but more rolling up your sleeves type of work on Deep Space Nine. Those uniforms made sense, but then they started rolling them out everywhere, and I said, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
By the way, that Chief O'Brien's costume was designed with pre-rolled up sleeves because he was like, because the actor Colin Meaney was like, I'm the guy who's like getting in there, and he was like, I need to be able to roll up my sleeves, and they're like, yeah, because you never see anybody else his sleeves, pushed up until Lower Decks, where mariners are constantly like rolled up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
who in her own way has a similar work ethic, I think.
But it's because I do feel like all these uniforms are still recognizable as Starfleet uniforms because they all have the Delta badge, and usually some variation of the color scheme.
Right.
So I don't mind a new sort of slicker look for a for costume design. Somebody online, I wish I could credit them, but you can Google it. Somebody redesigned movie era costumes, but it would be like gold, blue, and red. Much like the
Right.
old,
Yeah.
which would have been really cool.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, I guess it's just that their way of currently of, we used to have back in the original series, the different, chess things,
Yes.
indicators for each ship. So I guess that's, it doesn't take me out of it. I mean, it's noticeable, but it doesn't say that doesn't make any sense. It does, it's fine.
Yeah,
I want to go back in because Craig made a point here, and I want to share it about the Dauntless. We got into another thing, so it didn't fit in there. But Craig is reminding us that the Dauntless has a slipstream drive, the same type Voyager prototyped in the Delta Quadrant.
Oh, very cool. Well, I told you that. So I knew it was some bit of Star Trek technobabble.
Right.
The Dauntless. Also, I loved how much bigger the Dauntless was than the Protostar.
Yeah.
We don't think of that. I mean, I don't think of the Protostar as being as big as the Enterprise, but it's not a nothing ship.
Right.
But you got to see the perspective. The Dauntless has like multiple decks.
Right.
And,
right.
It is a fully. I wish we would see. I mean, we've seen a few background people. I would like to see some more Dauntless people, even if they're just background.
Sure.
We're seeing our version of the Best Friends gang, as they used to say on the Rachel watched the Star Trek podcast.
Right.
Spock and McCoy is the Best Friends gang.
Yeah.
Because they tend to always be working together. I would like to see some people like who the engineer is. Starfleet must run a Project Runway uniform division. I think so.
That's excellent.
I love that, Craig.
They have a hologram of Tim Gunn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're doing an unconventional materials uniform this week.
Yeah.
Oh, great! We got to make it out of Glad bags.
Now, was I the only one that found that little bit of a possible plot contrivance in the fact that sickbay had like a full-size view screen like the bridge does?
Yeah, that felt like, I mean, listen, it was funny because when the diviner first was found, and he wakes up and he's all kind of confused. I'm like, oh, is he playing them? Because he seemed like the guy, but then but of course he got a full snoot full of Medusan, unfiltered beauty,
Right.
and lost his mind. So
Right.
I'm, it's slowly coming back apparently.
Yes.
And then you kind of wonder, like, will he remember what happened in his home world? Will he hold? Is he going to hold on to that grudge? Has he forgotten about it? And will he be reformed in some way? I don't know.
Remind me a bit of Gul Dukat in the final episodes of DS9, actually.
Yeah.
I remember wondering, says, well, is he kind of on a redemption arc here? And of course he wasn't, but maybe it'll be similar to that. Maybe it'll go a different direction, but it was reminiscent in my mind.
Right. Well, one wonders if they're going to have a redemption for him in order to connect him back with Gwen or not.
I don't know.
So
I mean, I think they're going to. I mean, obviously, the Protostar and Dauntless crews will eventually have to meet face to face in a more honest manner.
Right.
So,
and the question is whether we're going to resolve the diviner plot before the show comes to an end or not. And I would like to hope we do, because then it would be interesting to give them something else to deal with.
Well, we had lots of homages to Star Wars this week. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be totally unexpected,
right,
for him to take a Darth Vader arc. But then again, maybe it would be better if they didn't.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I get it. It might be. I don't know. It's a tricky thing. Sometimes for a kid show, they will want to do that to show that the idea of redemption is possible. But I don't know. Right. I'll be curious because, like I said, since they are by the the neutral zone, so they're close to sort of main Federation space.
Right.
Even if they're more on the edge of it. So
yeah,
they're
getting in there.
There are been a lot of maps drawn of the Star Trek galaxy, and it is they seem to vary with everybody has different impressions.
Right.
I mean, it seems like it is established what star Vulcan is around and what star Andor. Like there's certain things, like the closest one they'd be like, oh, there's Alpha Centauri, it's this and this and this.
Right.
But where's Beta's end relative to Earth or Vulcan? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the writers were had a big galactic map in the writers' room where it was like, well, they can't get there by next week because that takes
Right.
a solid month's journey. They just make up a name, or they just pick a name out of a astronomical guide and say, well, this is where they are this week.
Yeah.
That's what's going on there.
Yeah.
You'd be wrong.
Well, there's definitely room for interpretation as far as the distances and relative positions of the various worlds, because I tend to think of the 4 quadrants as being like a pie chart. So in that sense, the gamma quadrant is as close as the beta quadrant.
That's true. Well,
but then again, I'm also using my 2-dimensional thinking that Kanuni and Singh taught me. So who knows if
well,
right. And you're assuming that Sol is in the middle, which it's not.
Right.
No, I mean, Sol, like the center of the galaxy is just ripe with swollen stars and black holes, and there are some astronomers who theorize that there is a mega black hole somewhere in the middle of our own galaxy. But Earth always is system 001. This is a TV show made on Earth.
Right.
Such as so we sort of slip our primacy in as a result. But I am enjoying this show. That's
right.
we pick a few nits here and there, but
I
think this show's mission is to introduce Star Trek to a younger audience, and they're doing a good job by sort of each week adding them a little more. Why don't you try this? It wasn't bad. Yeah, right. How about try some of this? And then it's expands their palette gradually.
Right.
And because it is an animated show, there's a lot of bright colors, a lot of movement, and I think that's inherent to any sort of animated show, because it's about those sort of dynamic visual elements that catch your eye, and then you have to have, and with good writing, then you get really drawn in. So,
well, and my thought on it is that any kind of constructive criticisms or nitpick should never be offered apologetically.
Right.
I mean, there are haters, to be sure. That's we've seen that a lot in popular culture the last few years.
Right.
But for us to sit here and kind of get into the nitty gritty of it all, just tells me that the bulk of it, the important part of it, is exceptional.
Right.
I would agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think there's so far, and I don't see that there will be. I don't think we've had a major issue with this show at all. They've all just been things like, how did they get there? And how would the Dauntless follow them? And I mean, they're real. It's not even a nitpick. It's just like, let's take a point and discuss it.
Yeah.
Brings up discussion points. Exactly.
So, all right, guys, we are 4 minutes over 9. I think I'm going to roll us out of here. Is there anything else left that you guys want to say before we get out of here?
Welcome back, Okana.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Next week's
and maybe
episode,
they'll bring Terry Hatcher in to guest star with them in a future episode.
There you go. Next week episode is our Turkey Day episode.
Yes.
Which will be a pre-recorded episode because Thanksgiving is the day this show drops, and I'm sure we will all be with friends and family enjoying a lovely meal. But you can still tune in and watch our Thanksgiving Day special in which we are going to be looking at the Turkish version of Star Trek.
I can't wait.
That exists. Not making it up.
AKA, also known as Chris. I love your
Well,
title.
I call it Star Turk, but that's, you know,
I love it.
Yeah. I'm hoping I'm not offending somebody, but at any rate, so that'll be fun. We're gonna watch little segments of it, you know, and then probably have some other conversation in between, you know, just to fill that episode out and have a nice time and just sort of hang out.
Well, discuss what we were grateful for. What Star Trek things are we grateful for?
That's true. We will talk about that too. So yeah, don't hesitate to tune in after you're digesting your turkey, because there will be a Trek tonight that night.
All right.
I got a tickle in my throat.
Yes.
So I'm gonna roll us out of here, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll see you all very soon. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. And then after that, we will be back with a doubleheader in which we will be doing both episodes in one.
There you go.
Did I miss it? Cliff Diamond.
Why I oughta showing up the last minute.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Unfortunately, you did miss it, Cliff. We go up at 8, but yeah.
But go back and watch and give us some comments.
Or Twitch.
Anywho, yeah, we will. Yeah, do it all again. Okay. Yeah.
If only we had recorded this in some manner.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is available on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. But yeah. So I guess that's about it. I'm gonna roll us out of here.
All right.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.